The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to The Best in the World with Richard Parr, our first episode of 2017. And what a cracking one I've got for you today. The two-time open water swimming world champion, Keri-Anne Payne. Great chat I have with her on this week's show. We talk a whole range of things, including the transition she had to make from swimming in a pool to swimming in open water and some of the hazards which happen. I ask her about sharks, but there's no problem with sharks. It's jellyfish. It's all about jellyfish for her, and she talks about some of the scars she got, some of the different types of pain that they can give, and due to her fierce competitiveness, how even when she doesn't want to go in the water, she still goes in there, competes, and gives her very best. And that is what has made her the best in the world. Lots of things we cover on the show. We talk about her new business venture, Tri-Skate, teaching people how to swim, even if they've never swam before. And we talk about a lot of different things about how she has to feed during a race, the different methods that they do that, what happens if she misses the station and how costly that can be. We talk about her journey to the Olympics, including Beijing, London, and in Rio. And of course, we go into detail about what made her become a world champ, both in Rome and Shanghai. It's a fun episode with Keri-Anne Payne, and what a fantastic way to start the new year. How was your new year? Did you spend it well? Were you around lots of friends and family? Were you very merry, had a few drinks, and now you're back in the gym working hard? The most important thing, though, is I hope you've set your goals. You know, forget New Year's resolutions, set your goals, even if they're just a daily goal, a weekly goal, a monthly goal, a yearly goal. Make sure they're written down, look at them, target them, see what you want to achieve in these short time periods, because that's what the best in the world do. We've listened every single week to all of these top world champions, Olympic champions, former world record holders, former world number ones, and they tell us they're always doing their goal setting. So please try and write down your goals for the year. I'd love to hear about them. Why don't you send me a tweet at Richard_Parr on Twitter. Tell me what your goals are for the year. I would love to hear from you. All right, just before I get to the interview with Keri-Anne, I want to say that this show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is one of the leading suppliers of audiobooks in the world. 180,000 titles to choose from, and guess what, you can try out their service for free. It's really easy. Just go to audibletrial.com/best and they'll give you a free 30-day trial of their service. That includes one free download, so you're getting a free audiobook to listen to. How great is that? What a great way to start the year, by having a brand new audiobook to listen to. That site address again is audibletrial.com/best. Go and give it a go. Let me know which book you download. I'd love to hear about it. I'd love for you to tell me if the book was any good. Maybe it could be a good book recommendation for me in 2017. Would love to hear from you on the Twitter page at Richard_Parr. And that Audible code, one more time, is audibletrial.com/best. All right, let's get to it. Let's get to my interview with the best in the world, Keri-Anne Payne, the two-time open water swimming world champion.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Two-time open water world champion Keri-Anne Payne, welcome to The Best in the World with Richard Parr. It's so great to have you on this week's show. We've had the Rio Olympics earlier this year, but what have you been up to since then, Keri-Anne?
Oh, since then, I have had the most amazing time. I've spent 3 weeks in the Caribbean with my new business, going around the Caribbean, teaching people how to swim and doing sporting retreats, which has been so much fun. I've absolutely loved it. It's been a nice respite from, getting up at 5 a.m. every morning and going training. So it's been really fun to pass on a bit of my knowledge onto other people who are keen to take up new sporting challenges like open water swimming.
Tell us a bit more about your business. When did it start and how's it all going?
Well, my husband, David Carey, he's a former 3-time Olympian as well. He quit his job. He decided it was time to kind of help me with this idea that I'd had from such a long time. And the business is called Tri-Skate. And it was an idea that I'd had and I just didn't really have the skills and the time because I was busy training to really set it up. So David left his job and he helped me set up Triscape, and that was in December this year. We officially launched in May, which was really exciting. We went down to London and we had quite a few journalists come along, and people talked to us about our retreat, which we've actually just had out in St. Lucia, out at the Body Holiday, which was amazing. In 2 weeks, we taught 60 people how to swim, which is just mind blowing that, that many adults were so keen to learn how to swim. And we're realizing that there's so many stigmas attached to adult swimming, stigmas like people either can't do it, or they're too scared, or they're too embarrassed to do it, or they think that, learning to swim as an adult can be patronizing and all that kind of stuff. So we're kind of breaking down all those barriers with the company Triscape and trying to show everyone that it's a life skill that you really need to have. Swimming is this amazing thing that can, give you a lot more. It's a challenge. It's a workout, as well as when you go away on holiday, you can swim in any kind of sea, or if you've got kids, you want your kids to learn how to swim, all that sort of stuff.
Sounds really interesting. Yeah, I look forward to learning more about that as you guys grow as a business and start doing more things like you've just done in St. Lucia. Sounds great. So what do you tell these people who've never swum before to try and get over that fear?
Well, what we try to do is just build their confidence, and we always start with them in the pool. So no matter what their sporting challenge is, whether it's just literally getting into the pool for the first time, or whether they're a masters swimmer trying to beat their 50 PB time, for instance, we start in exactly the same way every time, which is with this new method of swimming that we've come up with called straight line swimming. And there's 3 fundamentals in there. The first one is breathing, and then body position, and then propulsion. And we don't move on from the breathing until we get that completely right. So we have everyone in the pool. And like I said, it's about that kind of confidence. So what we do is make sure that people are really comfortable and confident with the most fundamental part of swimming, which is breathing. And it's amazing how many people breathe differently in the water than they would do either on land, or if they go for a run or anything along those lines. So for us, it's about breaking everything down, making it really simple and easy so people can really, learn for themselves and understand for themselves how is the best way to do it. Because if they're learning it for themselves, they're more likely to remember it. So it's all about gaining that confidence with everybody. And from there, once we get them breathing right and we get their body position right, we then add in things like open water swimming onto that. And in the Caribbean, that's obviously really easy because the water is crystal clear and it's nice and warm. But in the UK as well, we have some incredible locations for open water swimming and wild swimming, like Loch Lomond and Lake Windermere and all that kind of stuff. So I think people love the idea of taking up an open water swim because there's not anything quite like it. You're really putting yourself under, a bit of pressure because you're out into the open water. But there's this perspective that you get from being in the open water. It's just amazing. There's a real freedom to it and a real kind of sense of achievement and excitement and, a little bit of nerves at the same time because you are doing something very different.
Yeah, I wouldn't add Brighton Beach to those glorious locations. I don't think that's very good for open water swimming. So what you're teaching now, what are the similarities and differences, say, to when you first started swimming?
Well, I guess when I first started swimming, I was so lucky that I had a great support team of my parents who, took me to the pool and left me to it. I didn't have to, worry too much about the coaching and all that kind of stuff. So my parents just took me to the pool, left me to it. And then when I was at the pool, I had a fantastic coach, a lady called Di Williamson, who really taught me how to love swimming. She taught me how to, to all those things, the fundamentals, breathing, body position, how I could make the best out of myself, not worry too much about being the best swimmer in the world. At the time, I was only 5 or 6 years old. She was just all about it being fun and exciting, and all my friends were at the pool as well. So that's what I absolutely loved. And that's, kind of what we're trying to recreate with our retreats, is that it's this fun environment. Everyone's learning together. Swimming is an easy sport. You just need to know, the easier ways of doing it, which is, breaking things down and learning from the bottom up rather than starting with arms and legs and then working your way back down. So I guess there's those similarities. And again, I was lucky enough throughout my swimming career to have fantastic coaches who always let me grow rather than pushed me to kind of, well, I guess forced me into doing certain things I didn't want to do. It was all very much kind of an organic process of people helping me along the way and supporting me no matter what happened, through the ups and then through the downs.
At which point did you realise you were good, and at which point were you like, I want to take this seriously and, you know, aim for the Olympics, or I aim for world titles?
And I'm not sure that ever really came for me, that kind of, that drive and desire to specifically be the one thing. I've always had this amazing dream in my head of being an Olympian and, you know, winning an Olympic medal. That's always been kind of this dream in the back of my mind. But as a youngster, I had an older brother and sister, and my brother's 9 years older than me. So you can imagine, as a little kid, he was not at all interested in this little girl who was, you know, idolizing him basically. And he was a 9-year-old boy. He was like, get off, who are you? I don't want anything to do with you. And, you know, by the time he was 14, I was 5. So that became really annoying for him that he had this little sister. But I absolutely idolized him, and all I wanted to do was do what he was doing, and that was swimming. So for me, it was a really easy process to just kind of get into the pool. And I was always trying to do well so I could prove to him that I was worth, you know, like, look at me, I've done really well. So I was always, you know, concentrating on that rather than actually concentrating on who I was racing or the times specifically that I was doing. And, you know, every now and then I did a really good race. He was like, oh, well done. That's quite impressive. And I'd be like, woohoo, he spoke to me. It makes him sound really bad. We're really close now, and he's an amazing brother, and my sister's amazing as well. But, you know, you can imagine at the time a 14-year-old boy is not interested in his little sisters at all. So for me, it was always about that. And I always get asked the question, what would you have been if you weren't a swimmer? And the answer always categorically is I was always going to be a swimmer. I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I didn't know how far I could take it, but I knew that this was something I was going to work really hard at doing. And that's exactly what I did. I just, kept pushing, kept working. When I was younger, like I said, I had my brother to kind of be the one that I was doing stuff for. And then when I got older, I had a bit of a dark patch where I had no reason. I didn't really know why I was swimming. The Olympics seemed quite far out of reach. I had a couple of bad competitions. I wasn't swimming very well. Training was getting all a bit much and a bit boring, and I wasn't enjoying it. So I guess that was probably the hardest time of my career for me, was round about the 2006 marker, when I was sort of 18 years old. Had been swimming all my life, didn't know anything different. I was doing 800 freestyles at the time, went to the Commonwealth Games, I came 4th. So at the time for me, that was quite a devastating result, because I was so far off my PB. If I had gone anywhere near my PB, I would have medalled. And of the whole England team at that Commonwealth Games, I was one of 2 people that didn't win a medal. So, you know, a whole team winning medals, everyone was over the moon, and I was one of 2 people that didn't win a medal. So it was a really tough time for me. But my coach kind of could see that things were taking their toll. Training wasn't going so well. I was missing training here and there, which is really unlike me. I was never like that at all. And then, you know, eventually something had to give, and we decided to make a change. And the options were to change to the 400 medley. There was a competition in Sheffield where I could go and do a different event, the 400 individual medley, which is 100 of every stroke. Or I could go out to Australia and I could try this brand new thing called open water swimming and do a 10K. And, you know, although it seems quite a tricky choice to make, I decided that Australia seemed like a bigger draw than doing a 400 meters in Sheffield. And that was really the beginning of my Olympic journey from there.
Okay, so what were the main differences you immediately could see between being in the pool and doing open water swimming? What were some of the major training differences? Did you have to change anything as far as your diet? What things were involved when you made that transition?
There was tons involved with that transition. The first one, I was so nervous to go out in Australia, and I was just, you know, didn't really know what to do. Thankfully, my training partner at the time, Cassie Patton, she had already done a couple of 10Ks, so she had a rough idea of what was going on. And, you know, there was all sorts of things, like I was going from an 8.5-minute race in the 800 freestyle to a 2-hour race in the open water. So involved with that was obviously swimming 2 hours non-stop, but also having to feed during this swim. And, people, whenever I talk about feeding, people assume that, there's like tea and coffee and things like that. It's really not quite like that. It would be amazing if it was, but, feeding essentially is trying to get a little bit of carbohydrates and caffeine, sort of gels or a drink or something into your system as quickly as you can whilst you're trying to swim. So, I was really nervous on how this was all going to go. My first swim, I didn't really know what.
How does it go, Keri-Anne? I've never seen it, so I can't really imagine it.
Yeah, so basically what happens, there's two options really. One option is you, along the course, they have these big pontoons with all the coaches on, and they have like a long pole with a bucket at the end, and in there is a drink or it's a carbohydrate gel or something along those lines. And you swim them up at this very specific part of the course, and you take these gels or whatever it is, and then you turn onto your back for a split second, take as much as you can in, throw the bottle, and then carry on swimming. That's one option. Or the second option is that you carry the gels on you. So swimming costumes, that have like the big circle on the back, you kind of stuff them in there and hope that they almost last for the whole of the 10K. But the reason why I choose the second option to have them on me is it means that I can have those gels at any time. I don't have to wait for a very specific part of the race where everybody's going in to feed. I can feed at any part of the race, which essentially means I can take on this carbohydrate gel essentially while I'm still swimming. So, you can take it out, turn onto your back, rip it open, take in as much of the whole gel as I can, and then carry on swimming. So for me, that option seems a lot less disruptive to the race and to my performance and to my kind of rhythm of swimming as well.
Yeah, the one where you have to stop, it almost sounds like a Formula One pit stop, and it get really tactical. So yeah, please continue. You were saying that the other things that were different before I interrupted you.
Yeah, so there's the feeding part of it, that's one part. And the other thing we learned from that swim, when we train in the pool, if you can imagine, we train in a 25-meter pool or the Olympic distance pool, which is 50 meters. If we're swimming 10K in a 25-meter pool, that's about 400 lengths, which seems like a lot. So mentally, you have to deal with doing 400 lengths. And then if you're training constantly in a 25-meter pool, every turn that we do at the wall, we have a little break essentially, because we're turning, our legs come in and we kind of push off the wall. And on that push off, we're getting about 5 meters every single turn that we do. So 400 turns, we're not swimming for about 5 to 7 meters of that, and 400 times 5 equals a lot of meters that we're not actually swimming. But when we get into the open water, we don't have a wall that we can turn on. We don't have anything else that we can push off on. Essentially, we are swimming on our fronts for 2 hours solid. And that was probably one of the hardest things for me when I got out of the race, was really understanding why my back was so sore, why my shoulders were sore, because I was swimming 10,000 meters pretty hard without having a single break. So then we learned how to kind of counteract that and how to change that. And throughout the years, actually swimming in an endless pool. So, the pools that are like a big kind of tank and there's water pushing you. So you're actually staying in the same place.
Yeah.
For me, that seemed really, really boring. I know that swimming up and down the pool can seem really boring to a lot of people, but at least you've got something to do. You can talk to people, you can stop. But, mentally, I had to really force myself to get over that. And to get into these endless pools, because it was the only other way we could recreate the open water, but in a controlled environment. So we could control the temperature of the water, the temperature of the air. I live up in Edinburgh, so swimming in the sea, there's not many months of the year that I can actually swim outdoors up in Scotland because it's really cold. So we had to figure out another way to recreate that, which was swimming in these endless pools. And it took so long for me to really kind of not to understand, I knew why it was a good thing, but it took a while for me to really be okay with that being the reason why I'm doing this, is to directly help my performance. And once I eventually understood that, it was really refreshing to know why I was going into the endless pool, why I was doing that part of the training, because it was ultimately helping out with my Olympic preparation, which was, 12 years in the distance. So in terms of the actual swimming, that was the part of it that we kind of, it took me by surprise the very first time I did it, but realizing we needed to change things in and around there.
It sounds like a swimming pool treadmill, but you just can't listen to music or podcasts.
Absolutely.
So what about Australia? How was it being down there? Like, we've had the world record holder in paddleboarding on before, and Damien Ryder, and obviously in the last year there's been quite a few shark attacks against surfers. Have you ever had anything like that with any sharks or any other animals when you've been in the open water at all?
Thankfully, no sharks, which is good. Generally, when we do these open water swims, there's tons and tons of boats around, and animals in the sea, animals anyway that can hear, don't like the noise of the boats, so they tend to not come anywhere near us, which is great. But we were in Melbourne, which doesn't have too many shark attacks on this occasion. But I went back to Melbourne about 3 or 4 months later to do the World Championships. So exactly the same location. It was just 4 months later. This was my second ever 10K swim, and it was the World Championships. And when we got to the venue, we didn't really know too much about the course other than we'd been there a year before, and we didn't think we needed to swim in it because we'd already trained in it, like I said, about 4 months previous. So race day came along, and when we stood on the pontoon to dive in for the World Championship race, we just saw thousands and thousands and thousands of jellyfish. They were huge. They were like dinner plate sized jellyfish on the top. The bottom tentacles were really fat and quite short, but you could just see them everywhere. They weren't clear like quite a lot of jellyfish are. They were kind of white, so you could definitely see them, and they were everywhere. So there was 50 girls stood on this pontoon. We're all looking at each other before the start of the race going, what are we doing? And this was only my second swim, so I was kind of a bit terrified that there were these jellyfish in there. And the fact that we'd swam in there like 3 months previous and there was nothing. And then all of a sudden there's these thousands of jellyfish. So all the girls, 2 minutes before the start, looking at the water going, what are we doing here? This is the most ridiculous thing we've ever done. And all of us saying exactly the same thing to each other. And then the funniest thing, as soon as the starting thing went off, it was like everybody's brain just switched from what am I doing to competition mode. And everyone just dived straight in. So we had to dive into these thousands of jellyfish. And I must admit, the first few stings I got were interesting. And I probably screamed quite a few times down that first sort of 1,000-meter loop. But actually, these jellyfish in particular were just a bit like nettle stings. So it wasn't like a searing pain. It was just annoying. And again, at the end of the race, we were all talking to each other saying like, oh, if one person had got out, we'd have all got out kind of thing. But that was never going to happen because nobody took the chance to get out anyway. But yeah, so that was my second ever 10K swim. And actually, in hindsight now, I'm quite glad that was that experience because it didn't really ever get any worse than that. Jellyfish are definitely the thing that as open water swimmers we hate the most because they're obviously living, but there's no brain and there's no heart and all that kind of stuff. So they're not scared away by anything. So there's nothing you can do when they come in. You can't like take them out back into the sea. That's what the wind does. The wind brings them in and the currents bring them in and out and stuff like that. So it's just one thing that no matter what the conditions are, if they're there, you just have to swim through them and deal with it. So that was probably one of the hardest things to deal with on my second swim, but it really set me up for the rest of my career because it only got worse on one occasion. And again was totally jellyfish. And this time in Australia again, believe it or not, but this was in Perth. So Perth is quite notorious for shark attacks as well out there. And it took a lot of convincing for us to do this 5K swim, which 5K takes roughly about an hour. And it was myself and 3 other Scottish athletes. So we were away on a Scottish trip and I was there. The Scottish team very kindly let me join them, which was very good of them because I'm from Manchester. So that was always an interesting conversation. But there was 4 of us and we were like, right, guys, this is the swim. And we got into the start of the swim and it was glorious. The sea was warm. It was beautiful. It was blue. It was perfect. There must have been about 50 or 60 people that started the swim. And in that first sort of 5 minutes of us all getting in, there wasn't a single jellyfish anywhere. And then we started the race. It must have been about 50 meters after the start of the race, the jellyfish just started. And there was thousands of them, but these ones were a little worse than the ones that we had in Melbourne, and they stung really bad. Like, it was worse than anything I've ever had before. And again, because we're so competitive, at the end of the swim, every one of us was like, "Oh, I was waiting for you to get out," and I was waiting for you to get out. And in the end, none of us got out. We just swam through these jellyfish for an hour. And they were so bad, those jellyfish, that a couple of us have got scars from them. So I've got a few scars on my arm from those jellyfish. They're really bad. But I'll never do that again. I'll never swim through those types of jellyfish ever again. That's the one, the first time in my whole life where I do kind of regret doing that swim, because they were just awful. So jellyfish for me are worse than anything else out there.
Oh, it sounds like a world championship version of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. That's just, that's horrible. Did anyone complain to the organisers after that happened?
They did, but there's nothing they could do. It's, it was our choice to swim. And that's the thing that happens every time. It's my choice to swim. I'm just too competitive to stop swimming. A few people did stop. They got out. They didn't carry on swimming, but it's just my own competitive instinct that kept me in. But yeah, it was just one of those things. I've never actually wanted a shark alarm to go off more in my whole life, because if there was a shark alarm, it means you get out of the water straight away. It's just ridiculous.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
More from Keri-Anne Payne in just a moment, the Olympic silver medalist. But I just want to say that today's show, as well as Audible, is brought to you by Sportacino. Sportacino is a brand new sports breakfast show. It's broadcast every single weekday morning from 8 GMT on Facebook, Periscope, and on YouTube. Live 8 GMT. I am your host, and I discuss all the different things related to sport. Perhaps it's the results from the night before. So let's say your team lost, get involved. Tell me how annoyed you were. Were the right substitutions made? Was the referee a disgrace? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Sportacino every day. And then we also do long form interviews talking to people from across the world. We've had people from Uganda, Singapore, you name the country, Qatar. We've had them on the program. We've got lots planned for you in 2017. So check out Sportacino. It's sportacino.com. That's SPORTUCCINO.com, sportacino.com. In fact, have a look at the resources page. Lots of information there on exactly how we make the show and all that goes into it. So take a look at that, the resources page on sportacino.com. They are a sponsor of the show today on The Best in the World. All right, let's return to our interview with Keri-Anne Payne.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
So after that first World Championships, you then went to Beijing in 2008, got a silver. How was that whole experience for you?
It was incredible. So 2 years previous, like I said, I was in a really dark place. I didn't think I was going to make the Olympic team. It all seemed quite far and out of reach. And then all of a sudden, I was doing 10Ks and I'd made the Olympic Games for the 10K. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. I can't believe I've done this. And so we went to the pool trials for the Olympic Games, and that was in when was that? That was in just after the World Championships qualifiers for my open water. So I was just about 2 or 3 weeks had already qualified for the Olympics, so there was no pressure on me, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go to the pool trials and just see how I do, just go and have fun and really enjoy it. And at that time, when I started doing 10Ks, I also did start doing different events in the pool. So I did the 200 and the 400 individual medley, which I mentioned earlier. And we went to the pool trials. And the very first race was the 200 individual medley. And I still don't quite know how I did it, but I managed to qualify for the Olympics in that race as well. So I've now qualified for a race that was 2 minutes and 12 seconds long, as well as a race that was 2 hours long.
Oh, wow.
So for me, the difference in that was just crazy. And then later on that week, I qualified for the 400 individual medley as well. So all of a sudden, I'd gone from not thinking I was going to qualify for the Olympics at all to qualifying for 3 different events in 2 separate sports, essentially, because open water swimming is pretty much a different sport to pool swimming. So it was just an absolutely amazing experience. And I loved the trials of both the open water and the pool trials as well. It was just really special to have had the trials, to make the time, that feeling that you get when everybody's saying, well done, and that's amazing, and I can't believe you've done that. My parents crying and being really proud. And at the time, my boyfriend, David, who is my husband now, he'd also qualified for a second Olympics. So yeah, we were just all absolutely over the moon. It was an amazing couple of months. And then in the lead up to the Olympics, it was my first one. We got all the kit, and that was amazing. Got like 3 huge whole bags worth of kit I didn't know what to do with, but you get told to take all this stuff with you, so you take it all with you. And we flew out to Beijing, and for me, when I told people about the 10K, because it was the first time it had been in the Olympics, nobody knew what this crazy event was. So I was explaining to everybody, in the lead up to it, what open water swimming was. We swim for 10K, we swim out in the open, and everybody was like, you are crazy, which essentially, I guess we probably are. But it was really, amazing to be part of history. Essentially, we were the very first, the inaugural 10K for the Olympic Games. And I guess at the time we kind of revolutionized the sport, because we were the pool swimmers, myself, Cassie Pan and David Davies. We were all pool swimmers, and we'd all swam races in the pool at the Olympics as well. And we were transferring those skills now into the open water. And what we did at that competition is all 3 of us won an Olympic medal, which was, amazing and crazy and wonderful all at the same time. David won a silver in the 10K. I won a silver, and Cassie Patton won a bronze. So it was just, that whole week just is a bit of a blur of just smiling and happy, and just, not being like, wow, did that happen? And, putting your medal under your pillow and wake up in the morning and be like, oh, no, it definitely did happen. It wasn't a dream. It's definitely real. It was incredible. And coming home, and everybody all of a sudden, having watched the race, people I never thought about, every time you mention, I swam at the Olympics, and everybody I spoke to, I'm like, oh, what event was it? The 10K. They're like, oh, that crazy one with the Russian girl and the other girl and the British girl. And yeah, it was just amazing. And for me, one of my proudest moments actually was going to the London Olympics and walking out to 30,000 people around Hyde Park watching open water swimming. And it was only 4 years previous to that I said I was telling people what open water swimming was, and nobody knew anything about it. So in 4 years, we'd gone from no one knowing anything about it to 30,000 people choosing to come and watch an open water swim. And then the number of swims that people, and the number of events that are now running through the country. I mean, something like the Great Swim Series has 25,000 people doing their events every single year, which is mind-blowing that in only 8 years, the sport has completely changed, and there's so many people doing it now. And it's just amazing to see. Absolutely one of my proudest moments to date is helping to create this kind of legacy of open water swimming around the world.
Yeah, and you did that certainly in 2009 and 2011 when you became a world champion at that. How great was that experience?
Oh, amazing. What I did after the Beijing Olympics was I sat down with my team, and it was a really fantastic moment to sit there and be like, yeah, we did really well. And then there was that competitive edge in me that came out again, and I was like, actually, I know I can beat that Russian girl. I mean, going into the Olympics, she was the 8 times world champion, so she was definitely the best swimmer, and she pretty much had that race to lose, if you know what I mean. So she should really have won it, which is exactly what she did. But I thought, you know what, I can beat her. I know I can. I know I've got a bit more in me. Beijing, I'd only done about 4 or 5 races, and I knew I had another whole year until the World Championships. So we sat down with the team, sports scientists, the psychologist, my coach, and the nutritionist, and we sat down together and we were like, right, this is what we need to do, and what can we do to make it better? And we set about going through as many races as I could to try and to really understand what it was that could make me a better swimmer. And the training was amped up a bit. We were trying new things in the pool, we were trying new things on land, trying to recreate as much as we could the kind of the race and how we could simulate that to make my race better. So going into the World Championships in 2009 in Rome, I was really confident with my preparation.
What were those actual things that you pinpointed, Keri-Anne? What were the things that you improved on and worked harder on once you had that chat?
Yeah, so it was things like in the gym, it was I'd stopped doing weights and did a bit more sort of cardiovascular stuff. So to be a long distance athlete or an endurance athlete, you don't need to be mega muscly. It's just about being lean, but about being strong. So making sure all the little muscles, certainly in my shoulders and in my back and lower back specifically, were as strong as they could possibly be, because in the open water, there's a lot of other things you need to do, like sighting is a big part of it. So you're constantly lifting your head up while you're swimming, which puts a lot of pressure on the rest of your body while you're swimming for 10K. And I'm looking up sort of every 6 to 8 strokes. So you can imagine how many times we're looking up during a 2-hour race. And so that was one part of it. And we were really working on strengthening up those muscles. And in the pool itself, we also worked on very specific training. So it wasn't so much training for an 800 anymore, which is what I was always doing, and what the norm for distance swimmers was training for an 800, because that, before the Beijing Olympics, that was the longest event you could do. So training then became a bit more about doing slightly longer, harder main sort of sessions as well. And one part of training which I absolutely hated until probably the last 3 or 4 years, until again I really understood why it was good for me to do it, was doing long swims. So on a Friday morning, without fail, it was always a 5K straight. And I used to hate it. Like, it's the thought of swimming for 5K in a pool, up and down, no music, no one to talk to, nothing to look at other than the clock, trying to remember how many laps I'd done, all that kind of stuff. It was my least favorite thing, but it was part of the training that we had to do. So kind of that was another part of it. And then the nutrition side of things as well. So we learned that carbo loading kind of 1 to 2 days before the race was beneficial, because it meant that our glycogen stores were topped up and they were full, so that when we were doing the swim, if we missed a feed or if something didn't go quite well, we knew that psychologically as well, we knew that the body was as prepared as it could be for that sort of swim itself. So yes, we tried a whole new range of things, and I traveled the world, went to Hong Kong, went to Milan, went to Seville, went all over the world, China, to try all these new races and just practice different things. And so going into the World Championships, I was really confident in all of that preparation that I had done. And I guess there's a couple of mind games as well in there. I knew that I was a target because I was a silver medalist, and from the previous year, so one of the favourites to win. And in a couple of the swims before that, a few people had tried to stop me from getting to the front of the pack, which is where, at the time, where my preferred position was, to be leading the race. So I kind of knew that I needed to change something slightly, or else if people stopped me from getting to the front, then it was always going to be a bit tricky. So what we did was, when we were in the preparation before the race started, I was wearing a bright orange swimming cap that had Great Britain, and it had my name, Payne, on the side. So in the whole preparation, that was when we did our last briefing, when everyone saw us, when we were getting ready for the swim. So everyone kind of associated me with wearing this bright orange hat. And it was probably, so we got into the water, we were just about to start the race, and everybody was focusing on the race starter rather than focusing on anybody else. And with about 30 seconds to go, I changed positions, and I actually had a black hat underneath the orange one. So I whipped off the orange hat to just have this black hat underneath. And as we started the race, so nobody saw me do it. Before I even started the race, I'd taken this orange hat off and I had this black one on underneath. So I started the swim, and I could see everyone looking for the orange hat and no one could find it. And what it meant was I was kind of on the outside and managed to get out in front of everybody. And it wasn't until a little while, I think people realized that I'd changed hats at the last second and I was actually now in this black hat, but it was too late because I was already in front. So yeah, little mind games like that was quite fun, and and it worked a treat because on that particular race I came out with the gold medal on that one.
Oh, amazing! And then you did similar in 2011. I'm sure you couldn't play that same trick again in Shanghai, could you? So what was different there? Was it anything to do with confidence, or was it just a good race? How were you able to retain that title?
On that occasion again, I've thought quite long and hard about why that race was so good, and it was again because of my preparation. I just had an absolutely amazing year. My training was outstanding in terms of the training I was doing. I didn't race very much that year because I thought that for me training was the thing that was going to help me get to the top again, and then I needed to change other things, which meant that training became my main focus. So I actually only raced twice that year. The qualifiers and then actually the World Championships themselves. But I spent so much time just in the pool training, doing harder, swimming for longer. And I must admit, we changed a couple of the hard sessions that we were doing to be, again, a bit more specific to open water swimming. So instead of sessions being, 30, 100, say, going as fast as we could, that's what we, on a certain time, that was kind of the very standard session that everyone does, if you like, as a distance swimmer. You do 3100s best average on, say, 1.5 minutes. But actually, in a 10K, I don't get a chance to rest. There's no wall for me to stand on at the end to have a 20, 30-second rest at the end. And I'm never actually swimming at the times that I was doing this. I was, say, going around about 1 minute and 1 second for 100 freestyle, really pushing it as hard as I could. But when I'm in a 10K, I'm actually never able to swim at that pace. So we decided what we needed to do was change sessions around. So the session changed to a lot shorter reps, but actually a lot shorter rest as well. So I was swimming at race pace, if you like, which was like a 105 to a 108 base for every 100, but only getting 5 to 10 seconds rest in between. So everything then became more about short rest as opposed to swimming as fast as I could in the pool. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that really does. And so you then went into the London Olympics as the 2-time world champion. Did it add any extra pressure, not only being the world champion, but also being on home soil?
I didn't feel any pressure, if I'm honest. I was very prepared. I felt prepared for the pressure, if you like. Mentally, I was in a really great place. I had a great psychologist, a guy called Simon Middlemass, and we worked really hard together to make sure that the pressure I didn't feel this pressure on me. And I loved the build up to the Olympics. Was amazing. Everybody in the UK was just so excited about the Olympics, and it was just incredible. I absolutely loved it.
It was like being in a different country at one point.
Yeah, totally. Actually, it was just outstanding. I felt like a complete rock star, which, I guess only rock stars feel, but it was amazing. Just as soon as you mentioned the word Olympian, people just went crazy. And my mom, she got to carry the Olympic torch as well, which was amazing. So she was part of the whole process as well. And it was just incredible. I'll never have a year like that ever again. It was just amazing. The thing, though, that I hadn't really prepared for, and again, that year I didn't really do very many races. I only did the qualifier. Well, actually, I qualified already for so the World Championships in 2011 is where I qualified for the Olympic Games. So I'd qualified a whole year out. Had a little bit of a back injury and then a kidney infection in the beginning of that year. So not an ideal preparation in the lead up to the Olympics, but I knew I still had a good chunk of time to get prepared and get ready, which I did again in those kind of 4 or 5 months before the Olympics. I had a great run in for the Olympics, but what I hadn't prepared for was plan B. So like I said, my preferred race tactic was to be out in front and to be leading. And that was the plan. There was no plan A, B, or C. It was just the plan, which was to get out in front and to lead the race and to finish first, essentially. And that was probably my naivety. So it was my second Olympic Games. I was 24 at the time, thinking I was a mature athlete. But in hindsight, I wasn't. I was just planning for the one thing, whereas I probably should have planned for, A all the way down to Z, essentially. And when the plan didn't work out, from the very start, there was another swimmer next to me the whole way, and she was quite pushy, and she was a bit more rough than I was prepared. I was used to. Normally, it was me out in front by myself, and she was kind of a bit different, and she wouldn't let me go into the feeding station, which was also quite tricky because I felt like I needed to go in. And when eventually I found the opportunity to go in, I missed the feed and it didn't go very well. And because I took an extra split second to go back and get it, it meant that all the girls behind me swam over the top of me because they were already moving forward and going for the rest of the swim. So I'd gone into this feeding station in joint first and then was churned out underneath all these girls in about 12th place. So all of a sudden I was in the mix, I was in the pack, I was in the fighting, which I'd never really prepared for, never really done before. And that for me was probably one of the hardest moments of my open water career, was making the decision. Everybody saw what happened that watched the race. So I could easily have gone, oh, well, everyone swam over me and I got a black eye and I got, everyone saw what happened. But again, that competitive edge and the fact that there was 30,000 people there watching me and I could hear them, I could see their faces because we were in Hyde Park in Serpentine, which is quite a small venue. And I could see people's faces shouting, go Keri-Anne. And I was like, right, no, I've got to do this. So I had to just kind of man up, if you like, and deal with the fact that I was getting hit and punched and stuff and just work my way back up. So, it was about a lap and a half to go and I was in 12th place and all I could do was just work as hard as I could to get back up. And I ended up finishing that race in 4th place and only 0.4 of a second behind a bronze medal and only 4 seconds behind the winner. So I'm proud of the performance that I did, from kind of getting punched and hit in the face and, working my way back up to 4th place. But yeah, in terms of the debrief, if you like, the review after that, we all realized, the whole team, but myself, as the main culprit of that, of just being kind of set in my ways and only planning for one plan rather than planning for the rest of it.
And then you took a little break afterwards, didn't you? Kind of a refresh, travelled the world. Where did you go? What places did you see? And in some ways, did it help inspire your new business, Triscape? Yeah,
it absolutely did. When I travelled the world, for me, it was about kind of learning new things, so putting myself under pressure. So it was a very strategic year off, and I knew that I wanted to go to Rio, but I just needed to take some time away from the day in, day out training that I was doing. So what we did was I trained 3 or 4 times a week, which is, amazing compared to the 10 sessions I was doing every week. So I felt really refreshed, only kind of dipping my toe into the water. And all the races that I chose around the world were ones where either it was cold or whether it was a really kind of violent race, if you like, in inverted commas, where it was boys and girls together, or whether it was just something different, something I'd never really experienced before. So my first swim that year was out to South Africa for a swim I've done many times before, something called the Mid-Mile Mile, which is a mile swim from one side of a lake to the other side. And the 16,000 people do that race every weekend. So, and it was a race I used to do because I was born in South Africa, a race I used to do as a kid. So it was really nice to go back and do that. But on this particular occasion, I decided I was going to do the 8 Mile Club, which is there's 8 1-mile swims over the weekend, 4 on Saturday, 4 on Sunday. And I decided I was going to do every single one of them rather than just the one, which I normally would do. And still try and race that one that I would, the kind of the main race for me, if you know what I mean, to try and win the race again. And that's what I did. So I swam 8 miles in one weekend, which was quite tricky, but great. It was great fun, and I really enjoyed it. So I was getting like 20 minutes rest between having to do a mile and then get back across the lake to the other side and then swim back again and get back to the other side. So that was kind of the first part of it. I traveled then to San Francisco, where I did something called the Tiburon Mile, which is over in Mill Valley, which is a really nice, picturesque, beautiful place. And it wasn't until after the swim that I found out that Tiburon actually means shark in Spanish. Which I'm glad I found out afterwards, not before.
Well, at least it wasn't jellyfish.
Yeah, there's no jellyfish, thankfully. But this swim was really cold, so it's in the sea there, which is about 15 degrees Celsius, and it was no wetsuit race, and it was boys and girls together at the same time, and again it was point to point swim. So I just remember standing at the start line, and it was pretty cold, and everyone was jumping around trying to get a bit warm, knowing we all had to sprint. And this particular race, the Tiburon Mile, they invite all of the university kids, the swimming guys and the water polo guys from all of the neighboring universities. So the first row was the elites, as they called us, and the second row were the kind of the varsity water polo players and swimmers. And I was stood in this front row as the guy was calling, "Can we have all the elites to the front, please? All the elites." So everyone was kind of squeezing past, and I was like, "Oh, excuse me, sorry, can I just get through?" And kind of like stood there. Just behind me was the first team of the water polo team for Berkeley, which is a really good university just around the corner from where we were. And they were all going, "Who do these elites think they are, coming here and like standing in front of us? Like, right, that's it. I'm going to do all of them on this first swim." And I was like, "Oh no, please don't hurt me." And the thing with water polo players is that they're really fast and really quick for about 50 meters. And then the lactic acid sets in because they always set off too fast. And then, after that. So essentially the first 100 meters of the race involved all of these boys swimming over the top of all of us. And then 50 meters after that, all of the swimmers then swimming over the top of all of these water polo players because they started to struggle because they swam so fast. But what it meant was that I really had to learn how to keep my position, how to keep my place, not get swum over, and not let that kind of stuff bother me. That was kind of the races I did. And then another one, I went out to Brazil to do this swim called the King and Queen of the Sea, which is in the Copacabana. So it's my first taste of swimming in the Copacabana in Rio. And it was a relay swim, which I did with one of my friends from South Africa. And it was 500 meter swim with like a 50 meter run. And we had to do that 3 times each. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. So 500 meters of a sprint, which takes around about 7-8 minutes. So it was a sprint to do this 500 meter course, and then a beach run, a beach sprint of about 100 meters. So the reason that swimmers don't run is because we spend a lot of the time in the water. So having done the sprint and then running onto the beach to get this baton from our other teammate, and only getting sort of 7 or 8 minutes rest in between, and having to do it all again, and then having to do it all again. Oh, it was just so hard, but amazing fun. I absolutely loved it, but it was one of the hardest swims I've ever had to do.
Oh, I know we've nearly run out. We've gone over time, way over time, but it's been so great to hear from you, Keri. I just want to ask you 2 quick more questions. Firstly, how did Rio go for you?
Rio, I genuinely, coming out of the swim, was happy with the performance because I couldn't have done any more. I turned every stone, crossed every I, dotted every I and crossed every T. It just wasn't my conditions. It was really flat and it was really calm, which suits the really fast pool swimmer like Sharon Rowendell, who was the girl that won it. Whereas I prefer the real rough waves and, a little bit colder water. So in terms of conditions, it wasn't in my favor. But in terms of the race itself, I couldn't be happier with the performance because I did everything I could. And it was just incredible swimming in the Copacabana as my Olympic venue was just amazing.
That sounds fantastic. Well, it's been so great to learn from you today, Keri-Anne. Just before you go, could you maybe tell us how we can continue to follow your journey on social media, maybe how we can follow you and learn more about Triscape? And am I right in hearing that you also might be bringing out a cookbook?
So the cookbook is now turned into more of a YouTube channel. So I'll be hopefully very soon launching a brand new YouTube channel, which will be called Healthy is Tasty, which is all about my journey in terms of food and also lifestyle things on there as well. So all of my social media handles are Keri-Anne Payne. So I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and I will eventually be on YouTube as well. And all of that kind of leads into and helps me with my business, Triscape, as well. So our website is triscape.me. We're just about to launch our brand new website on Friday, so we're very excited about that. All of the new bits and pieces have been added to it, and we're really proud of everything that we're doing now, which involves masterclasses, one-to-one coaching, and a Come and Triscape series as well. So if you head to our website around about Friday lunchtime, everything will be on there.
Well, we will definitely check all of that out. Can't wait to see the website. Keri-Anne Payne, thank you for being on today's show, and thank you for being the best in the world.
Thanks for having me.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Thanks again to Keri-Anne Payne for being on this week's Best in the World with Richard Parr, the first of 2017. What a way to start the year. Well, Keri-Anne is our first open water swimmer on the podcast, but we have had other swimmers from in the pool, such as Natalie Coughlin, such as Nathan Adrian, such as Nick Gillingham. Go back and listen to those episodes. They're all on iTunes. They're all on Stitcher. They're all at richardparr.net. Go back and listen to them. And let me know what you think of them on my Twitter page, richard@_parr. And if you are listening to it on iTunes or on Stitcher, what would really help me out a lot is if you gave us a rating and review. It means so much. Even if you don't like the show, give me a 1-star. Tell me it's terrible. Tell me where I can improve. But if you love it, give me a 5-star rating. That really helps. Give me a good review. That really helps. I'd love it if you just spent, it's a couple minutes of your time to try and do something which matters so much to me and us here at the Best in the World. All right, we've got another great episode coming for you next week. Go and check out my Twitter page and also have a look at the Facebook page, Best in the World with Richard Parr. And also check out my website, richardparr.net. All right, have a wonderful 2017. Write those goals down, and I'll be back with you next week on a Wednesday for the Best in the World.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.